We must stop the killings. We must stop this war. With these urgent words, Ukraine's president set the stage for a tense and closely watched meeting in Washington. This was not a routine diplomatic encounter. It was a gathering that pulled in not only American leaders but also the weight of Europe, signaling the global stakes of the ongoing conflict. The timing was critical. The meeting followed earlier exchanges with Moscow and came just before consultations with leaders from Britain, France, Germany, Italy, Finland, and the European Union. For Kyiv, it was a moment to send a clear message. Ukraine is not isolated, and its resistance still rests on Western backing. Expressions of thanks were directed not only to Donald Trump, but also to the First Lady, who had personally delivered a message to Vladimir Putin about the suffering of Ukrainian children. Ukraine's First Lady reinforced that appeal, underscoring that behind political decisions stand real families, real children, and uncertain futures. Journalists, however, quickly cut to the chase. Who actually holds the power to stop the war? President Zelensky insisted the answer is obvious. Russia must halt the aggression it launched. Trump offered a different perspective, suggesting that Ukraine itself could bring an almost immediate end if it chose to do so. He even floated the idea of a trilateral summit involving Washington, Kyiv, and Moscow, describing it as a reasonable chance to reach peace. Yet uncertainty hung over the room. When pressed on whether U.S. support for Ukraine was close to its limit, Trump avoided drawing red lines. "It's never the end of the road," he remarked, while acknowledging the devastating reality. Thousands of lives lost in recent weeks, and millions displaced or traumatized over nearly 4 years of fighting. Trump stressed that this was not my war, pointing to the Biden administration's role, but added that he wanted a solution that would be good for everybody. Zelensky's outlook was starker. He spoke of relentless daily strikes, wounded civilians, even a young child injured in a bombing. His message was firm. Ukraine has no choice but to resist, and it cannot do so without sustained Western aid. At the same time, he welcomed Trump's talk of three-way negotiations, interpreting it as a sign that diplomacy might open a path forward. Still, enormous questions remain unanswered. If peace talks do take place, would Ukraine be expected to surrender territory? Could American or European forces eventually serve as peacekeepers? Neither Trump nor Zelensky offered clarity, leaving the debate open as speculation grows. It was here that Trump tried to reframe the moment. This cannot be a short-term peace. If peace comes, it must endure. His words pointed to a demand for a settlement that would not merely freeze the war but prevent its return. He emphasized the need for coordination with both Ukraine and Russia, alongside Europe, and stressed that security guarantees must be at the core of any agreement. Asked whether U.S. troops might directly participate, he left the door open, saying such matters would be discussed with European partners later in the day. For now, he underscored that Europe stands at the front line, while U.S. support remains indispensable. When confronted with Russia's claims about addressing the root causes of the war, Trump responded with his usual confidence. The conflict will end simply because it must. He asserted that both Zelensky and Putin ultimately want peace, remarking that the whole world is tired of it. Drawing on his own record, he reminded the audience that he had overseen the conclusion of 6 previous wars. But this one, he admitted, is far more complex. To illustrate the risk of delay, he pointed to other unresolved conflicts, from the rivalry between India and Pakistan to the decades of bloodshed in Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo, as cautionary tales of what happens when wars are allowed to drag on without a decisive settlement. European leaders are far from passive observers in this process. Trump emphasized that his upcoming talks with 7 major powers would heavily influence the direction of negotiations. Their voices, he suggested, could determine how peace is defined. But that definition is precisely where the uncertainty lies. Would peace require Ukraine to give up land still under threat from Russian forces? Trump avoided a definitive answer, repeating only that the outcome must be a lasting peace, not another fragile pause in hostilities. The meeting also carried a more personal note. In an unusual diplomatic gesture, the U.S. First Lady wrote a handwritten letter directly to Vladimir Putin, urging him to consider the future of children whose lives have been scarred by the war. Ukraine's First Lady personally delivered the message, adding emotional weight to the appeal. Whether such symbolic acts can sway entrenched political positions remains unclear. Yet they serve as stark reminders that behind strategy and borders lie millions of innocent children who are paying the price for decisions made in distant halls of power. This raises a difficult question. What does lasting peace actually mean? Is it a compromise that trades land for stability, or an agreement that insists on justice even at great cost? Trump, reflecting on the First Lady's letter, gave his own emotional response. "We want to see something other than funerals." He described Melania Trump's compassion for children and her heartbreak over their suffering. The letter, he added, was received respectfully, though whether it changes the course of the conflict is still uncertain. From symbolism, the discussion shifted to democracy. A journalist asked Zelensky if Ukraine would be prepared to hold elections once peace returned. His answer was clear. Yes, but only when security could be guaranteed. As long as bombs continue to fall, ballot boxes cannot open. A ceasefire, he stressed, is the minimum requirement for democratic life to resume. His words revealed a painful truth. War not only takes lives, it suspends the very institutions meant to safeguard them. Trump seized the opportunity to deliver a pointed remark. If war can halt elections, what would that mean for the United States if it ever faced a similar situation? Half serious, half ironic, his comment highlighted a deeper dilemma. How resilient is democracy when its most basic function, free elections, becomes impossible under fire? The conversation then turned sharply toward the media. A journalist asked whether the American press even wanted peace. Trump responded with a familiar complaint, that the media had consistently undermined his efforts, ready to call any outcome a bad deal. He argued that even if Ukraine secured sweeping gains, many headlines would still cast his role in a negative light. According to him, this pattern of relentless criticism has followed him since before his first election. Yet, he reminded the audience, he had still won in a landslide, suggesting that public opinion mattered more than editorials. Zelensky, by contrast, stayed focused on Ukraine's priorities: resilience, democracy, and reliance on allies. But the exchange underscored a larger truth. Politics is shaped as much by narratives as by decisions. Media framing, public trust, and international perception can all determine whether a peace initiative is embraced or dismissed. In this war, the battle is not only on the front lines, but also in the stories told about it. At the center of the debate lies a difficult question. Can peace be built when trust in institutions, political, democratic, and media, has eroded so deeply? Trump himself returned to this theme with a sharp remark. If Putin comes, they say I lost. If he doesn't come, they say I lost. There's no winning with the press. For him, the problem is not the outcomes of diplomacy, but the way those outcomes are narrated. He argued that even Putin's past visits to the U.S., which he described as diplomatic successes, were twisted into stories of personal defeat. The press, he charged, was less interested in facts than in undermining his image. From there, Trump shifted to a domestic example, Washington, D.C. He presented the city's apparent turnaround as evidence of his effectiveness. Once notorious for crime, he claimed the capital had grown safer under his leadership. He shared anecdotes of friends, even Democrats, who told him they had gone out to dinner without fear for the first time in years. To him, busy restaurants and families enjoying the streets were the real signs of progress. Yet, instead of credit, he complained, opponents branded him a dictator. His defense was blunt. All he wanted was security for our people. The discussion soon circled back to Ukraine. When asked whether his earlier warnings of severe consequences for refusing a ceasefire still applied, Trump revealed the core of his negotiating philosophy. Permanent settlements are better than temporary halts. Ceasefires, he argued, often allow one side to regroup and continue the fight. Still, he admitted one undeniable advantage. You stop killing people immediately. Drawing on his past experience, he suggested that peace deals can be struck even while conflict continues, without waiting for formal truces. Reporters then turned to NATO. Why had Trump promised Ukraine strong security guarantees but avoided endorsing full membership? He reminded them that Moscow had long opposed NATO's expansion into Ukraine, making it a flashpoint well before the current war. Without committing to membership, he pledged that the United States and its allies would provide very good protection, very good security, while stressing that the details would be hammered out in future talks. Inevitably, the focus shifted to money. With Washington already spending hundreds of billions on Kyiv's defense, the question was unavoidable. How much more can the U.S. contribute? It is a debate that stretches beyond foreign policy into domestic concerns. Taxpayer fatigue, political divides, and America's role as global leader. The central challenge is clear. Can the U.S. continue to fund Ukraine's fight while persuading Americans at home that this is a battle worth carrying on? Trump's answer was striking. We're not giving anything away, we're selling weapons. With that, he drew a contrast between his own approach and the Biden administration's. He accused President Biden of sending more than $300 billion to Ukraine without accountability, framing his own strategy as transactional, support that also benefits America's interests. Trump insisted that if he had remained in office, the war would never have begun, sparing millions of lives and preventing the displacement of countless families. His conclusion was unflinching. Biden is, in his words, a corrupt and incompetent leader, responsible not only for this war but for failures at home as well. President Zelensky brought a contrasting perspective to the table. Ukraine, he explained, depends heavily on NATO programs and European financing to acquire U.S. weapons, which remain essential for its survival. Above all, air defense is critical. He singled out the American-made Patriot missile batteries, calling them indispensable for shielding Ukraine's skies and rebuilding long-term security. This is not only about the war, he stressed, but also about lasting security guarantees. Trump quickly picked up on that point, praising U.S. defense technology as unmatched worldwide. He described the Patriot system with a vivid image, like two bullets colliding in midair, to emphasize its precision. While acknowledging NATO's contributions, he underlined that under his approach, America is being compensated for its military hardware. This, he argued, marked a stark difference from Biden's policy, which he portrayed as handing over aid freely. Trump went further, claiming that in just 2 months his efforts had advanced peace negotiations more than Biden had achieved in 4 years, while insisting the war should never have started in the first place. Then the discussion took a sharp turn, from foreign battlefields to America's electoral rules. A reporter asked Trump about his recent social media post demanding the elimination of mail-in ballots and electronic voting machines. His response was immediate. Mail-in ballots are corrupt. You can never have a real democracy with them. He vowed to sign an executive order banning their use, describing absentee ballots as a source of massive fraud. Electronic voting systems, he added, were expensive, unreliable, and vulnerable to manipulation. Only paper ballots, he argued, could guarantee secure elections. In that moment, two worlds collided: Ukraine's fight for survival and America's internal battle over its own democratic system. Yet both centered on a single theme: trust. Trust in weapons to protect a nation, trust in allies to stand firm, and trust in elections to reflect the people's will. Trump pushed the point further, declaring, "Without fair elections and secure borders, you don't have a country." He argued that only paper ballots with watermarks and security features could be trusted. Machines, he said, were slow and unreliable. Mail-in voting, fraud. He even cited former President Jimmy Carter's past warnings about absentee ballots, insisting Democrats depend on them because, in his words, their policies are so unpopular. This argument tied back to his broader vision of security. Just as strong borders protect sovereignty, he said, honest elections safeguard democracy. Trump boasted that during his presidency, illegal immigration dropped to 0 within 3 months, an outcome he admitted even surprised him. For him, these achievements reinforce the core message: survival depends on secure borders and credible ballots. The discussion then swung back to Ukraine, where the stakes are even higher. Reporters pressed Zelensky on what guarantees he expected from Washington to secure lasting peace. His reply was direct. First, a modern and capable Ukrainian military, equipped with advanced weapons, training, and intelligence. Second, a framework of international support with the US and Europe providing firm security commitments. Would that mean American boots on the ground? Trump avoided making any promises. Instead, he emphasized Europe's role, noting that leaders from across the continent were already gathered nearby to discuss the issue. They want to give protection, he said, adding that the United States would also contribute. His focus, he explained, was ensuring a deal gets done, one in which responsibilities are shared fairly between Washington and its transatlantic allies. The conversation revealed a telling contrast. For Trump, security meant protecting America's democracy through tighter borders and election reforms. For Zelensky, security meant survival: air defense systems, Western alliances, and long-term guarantees against Russian aggression. The word was the same, but the realities were worlds apart. One about internal stability, the other about defending a nation's very existence. This leaves an unresolved question. Can these visions of security, domestic order in the US and international protection for Ukraine, be woven together into a single strategy that satisfies both sides? Trump attempted to frame his answer in universal terms. I love the Ukrainian people. I love the Russian people. I want the war to stop. With this, he avoided choosing one nation over the other, instead presenting himself as the advocate of peace above all. He praised Ukrainians as smart, energetic, and deeply patriotic, while emphasizing that his concern extended to everyone caught in the conflict, regardless of nationality. His message was designed to rise above divisions. The goal, he insisted, was not victory for one side, but an end to bloodshed. Pressed on his recent interactions with Vladimir Putin, Trump admitted the talks were still unfolding. He disclosed that a direct call with the Russian leader was scheduled immediately after his meetings in Washington. Whether that call leads to a trilateral negotiation, including the US, Russia, and Ukraine, could decide the next chapter of the war. If we have a trilateral, there's a good chance of ending it. If not, the fighting continues, Trump said, capturing the fragile crossroads at which diplomacy now stands. The moment carried both hope and uncertainty. On one hand, the possibility of negotiations brought a glimmer of relief to millions of Ukrainians living under daily bombardment. On the other, the sheer fragility of such efforts reminded everyone how easily peace can slip away. The stakes are immense, not just for governments and armies, but for ordinary people waiting to see whether their futures will be shaped by reconciliation or more destruction. As the talks drew to a close, one haunting question remained. Will this meeting mark the turning point that finally ends the war? Or will it fade into history as just another pause in a conflict with no clear resolution?